A boot caught her in the ribs and rolled her into the dirt. Her hands were tied behind her back. Blood ran down one side of her face. She could not open her right eye. A man spat near her head and walked away. Another kicked her once more before climbing onto his horse. 5 riders. 5 sets of hoofbeats moving off into the heat. She tried to lift her head and could not. She tried to scream and only a dry sound came out. The brand on her forearm was still warm. The word burned into her skin was thief. The woman in the dirt was Clara Mercer, 24 years old. And then hours later, a single horse came walking up the trail. Not running, walking. What the cowboy who climbed off that horse uncovered would unmake every man who left her there. Stay with me on this one. The horse's name was Hattie, and the man who climbed off her was named Jude Calder. He had been riding since first light, looking for a stray heifer that wasn't his concern but belonged to a friend who'd asked. He was 36 years old, tall, lean, quiet in the way that some men get quiet after a long life of paying attention. He wore a brown coat that had seen too many winters, and his boots had been resoled twice. When he saw the shape in the dirt, he thought at first it was a dead animal. Then he thought it was a coat someone had dropped from a wagon. Then he saw the hand. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He stepped down from the saddle and walked over slow, the way a man walks when he doesn't know yet what he's looking at. The woman was alive. Barely. Her chest rose, fell, rose. Flies had already started on the cut above her eye. He looked around. No tracks of returning riders. No sound of horses. They'd gone and meant to leave her gone too. He saw the brand then. Thief. Still raw. Still bleeding at the edges. Burned into her left forearm. Deep enough that it would never come off. He didn't say anything about it. He cut the rope from her wrists. He turned her gently and laid her on her side so she wouldn't choke on her own blood. He took the canteen from his saddle and tipped a small amount into her mouth. Most of it ran out. He tried again. A little stayed. He lifted her. She weighed less than a saddle and laid her across Hattie's back. Then he climbed up behind, holding her steady against his chest. He turned the horse north. There was an old place he knew, Maeve Donnelly's homestead. A widow lived there alone with 3 goats and a cat that hated everyone. She'd been a nurse once, before her husband died. She wouldn't ask questions and she wouldn't talk. Now here's the thing about Jude Calder. He had seen this before. Not this exact scene. But men deciding a thing about another person and acting on it without proof. He had seen a 14-year-old boy hanged for a horse the boy hadn't taken. He had seen a farmhand shot in a barn over a missing pocket watch that the rancher's own son had pawned. He had watched men ride away from their own evil with their backs straight and their consciences quiet. He didn't say it out loud. He never did. But somewhere inside him there was a ledger of his own. And every time he saw it happen, he made a mark. When he got to Maeve's place, she was on the porch shelling peas. She looked up. She saw the woman across the saddle. She didn't ask. She just stood up and held the door. "Bed in the back," she said. He carried the woman in. Maeve worked on her for 3 hours. Cleaned the cuts. Set a finger that was broken. Wrapped the brand in a damp cloth that smelled like crushed herbs. She didn't speak the whole time except to ask Jude to hold something or hand her something. He held. He handed. When it was done, she walked outside and lit a pipe. "She'll live," Maeve said. "If she wants to." Jude nodded. "You know her?" "No." "You know who did it?" "Not yet." Maeve took a long pull on the pipe and looked out across the flat country. "Whoever did it," she said, "wasn't one man. I heard them yesterday. 5 horses. Moving fast. Coming from the south, going back south. I figured cattle business. I was wrong." He looked south too. The country there ran flat for 30 miles before it broke into the foothills. Past the foothills was the town of Red Hollow. Past Red Hollow was the Hollis Ranch. He knew the country like he knew his own hands. He stayed on the porch through the evening. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He sat with the rifle across his knees and watched the road. Sometime after midnight, the woman stirred in the back room. He heard Maeve moving. He stood up and went to the doorway. She was awake. Her one good eye was open. She was looking at the ceiling. "Water," she said. Her voice was a scrape. Maeve gave her water. She drank. She closed her eye. She opened it again. She looked at Jude in the doorway. "Who are you?" she whispered. Jude called her. "I found you in the road." She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said one word. "Hollis." Maeve looked up. Jude stepped fully into the room. "What about Hollis?" he said. But the woman was already slipping under again, her eye closing, her breath going shallow. He stood there a long time looking down at her. Then he turned to Maeve. "I need to know everything about Garrett Hollis," he said. "Everything anyone said about him in the last 3 months." Maeve set the pipe down. "You should know," she said. "Before you go any further, Hollis owns the sheriff. And the sheriff owns the courthouse." Jude looked at her. "I know," he said. She came back to herself slowly over the next 2 days. Her name came back first. Clara Mercer. Then her age. Then the year. Then where she had been working. Then, finally, what had happened. She told Jude on the 3rd evening. Maeve sat with them in the small kitchen. Clara's hand shook around a tin cup. She didn't drink from it. She just held it. "I kept the books," she said. "For Garrett Hollis. For 2 years. Jude waited. "He brought me down from Cheyenne. My uncle wrote me a letter saying there was honest work and a good wage. I came. I needed the wage. My mother was sick. He paid me $12 a week. He was polite. His wife was kind. His sons mostly stayed away from me." She set the cup down. "Then last spring I started seeing things in the ledger that didn't match. Deeds being recorded for parcels Hollis didn't own. Land along the Sweetwater. 18 separate parcels. He was selling them to settlers coming in on the Cheyenne stage. Selling them for cash. $300 a parcel. Sometimes 4. And the land wasn't his. The land wasn't his. Most of it was Crow allotment. Some of it was federal grazing land. Some of it belonged to a man named Atwood who died 2 years before and had no heirs anybody could find." Jude rubbed his jaw. "How many settlers?" 18 families. Maybe more. He'd take their money, give them a deed his cousin in the land office had stamped, and a month later his sons would ride out with 24 men and tell them the deed was forged and they had no claim. They'd burn the cabins. Sometimes they'd burn more than that. Maeve closed her eyes. "The Pelham family," Clara said. "You might have heard. Last fall." Maeve nodded slowly. "I heard. I tried to talk to Hollis once. Just once. I said the ledger had errors. He smiled at me and said he'd look into it. That night his oldest son came to my room and put a knife on my pillow. Didn't say anything. Just put it there and left." Jude was very still. "I started making copies," Clara said. "Slowly. Page at a time. I hid them in a flour tin in the kitchen of the boarding house where I lived. I wrote a letter to a U.S. Marshal in Cheyenne. A man named Holloway. My uncle knew him. I gave the letter to a stagecoach driver and paid him $1 to mail it from outside the territory. And the driver gave the letter to Hollis. I don't know how much he was paid. I don't suppose it matters." She stopped. She breathed. "They came for me on a Tuesday. 3 of his sons and 2 ranch hands. They said I'd stolen from the strongbox. They produced a tally book with my handwriting in it that I'd never written. The sheriff was waiting at the ranch. He didn't even pretend to ask questions. He stood there while they tied me. He stood there while they put the brand in the fire. He watched." Jude's hands tightened on the table. "The brand was Hollis's idea," Clara said. "He said it would be more useful than a hanging. He said a hanged thief is forgotten in a year. A branded one walks around being remembered. He said it would teach the next bookkeeper to mind her own business." She looked up. My copies are still in the flour tin. If they haven't been found. The boarding house is on Front Street. Mrs. Doyle's. The flour tin on the top shelf, behind the dried beans. Underneath the false bottom. There are 43 pages. Jude stood up. I'll go tonight, he said. They'll be watching the house. Then they'll be watching the front. I'll come in from the back. He rode out an hour after sundown. He moved cross-country, avoiding the road. Hattie knew the way without being told. He came into Red Hollow from the north, behind the livery. He left her tied in a wash. He went on foot the last half-mile. Mrs. Doyle's boarding house stood at the end of Front Street. A back kitchen door that no one ever locked because the cat liked to come in at night. He knew this because 3 years before he had spent 2 weeks in the upper room, recovering from a broken collarbone. He had eaten Mrs. Doyle's biscuits every morning. He had learned the house. He went in through the kitchen. The cat looked at him and went back to sleep. He found the flour tin. He found the dried beans. He felt for the false bottom and his fingers closed around a thick stack of folded paper. He left the way he came. He was back at Maeve's place by 3 in the morning. Clara was awake, sitting up. She had asked Maeve to help her into a chair by the fire. When Jude walked in carrying the papers, she put one hand over her mouth. He set them down in front of her. She looked at the top page, then the next. Then she looked up at him. It's all here, she said. Yes. Every page. Yes. She laid her head down on her arms and cried for the first time since she had been pulled out of the dirt. Maeve put a kettle on. Jude pulled out a chair and sat down. He took off his hat and set it on the table. Clara wiped her face with the heel of her hand. She picked up the tin cup again, the one she'd been holding 2 hours ago, and finally took a drink. Tomorrow we ride for Cheyenne, Jude said. The marshal there. Holloway. We'll bring everything. Clara nodded. It's over, she said quietly. It's actually over. Maeve set 3 cups of coffee on the table. She sat down. Outside somewhere an owl called and was answered. The fire crackled. For the first time in many days the small kitchen felt safe. The dogs started barking at 4 in the morning. Maeve was on her feet before Jude was. She had a Winchester in her hands. 3 riders, she said. Coming up the lane. Jude moved fast. He grabbed the stack of papers from the table and pushed them inside Clara's coat. He helped her stand. Her legs barely held her. Back door, he said. Get to the root cellar. The trapdoor by the well. Get inside and pull it shut. Don't come out until I come for you. Jude. Go. Maeve went with her, half carrying her. Jude blew out the lamp. He took up his own rifle. He stood beside the front window. The horses came up to the porch. 3 of them. He recognized the lead horse, a tall bay with a Hollis brand. He didn't recognize the lead rider, but he recognized the man beside him, Sheriff Mason Cobb. Cobb dismounted. He walked up to the porch. He knocked on the door. Mrs. Donnelly, he called. Open up. This is Sheriff Cobb. We have a warrant for a fugitive we believe is on your property. Maeve came back from the kitchen. She set the Winchester behind the door. She opened it. Sheriff, she said. Cobb stood on the porch. He was a heavy man with a gray mustache. His belt sagged. His badge was polished. His eyes were not friendly. Maeve, I'm sorry to disturb you at this hour. There's been an escape. A woman named Clara Mercer. Convicted thief out of the Hollis spread. Sentenced and branded and put out to die, which I'll grant you sounds rough, but the law allows it for crimes against a man's livelihood when there's clear proof. Now I have a warrant for her recapture. She was seen yesterday on the trail north of here. A drifter helped her. We believe they came this way. Maeve held the door. I haven't seen any drifter. Mrs. Donnelly, please. I'd hate to have to search. You have a warrant for the woman. You don't have a warrant for my house. Cobb's mouth tightened. I can get one, he said. By tomorrow afternoon. Then come back tomorrow afternoon. He looked past her into the dark room behind. Jude stood in the shadow by the window. Cobb could not see him, but he tilted his head slightly. He could feel something. Maeve, I'm going to ask you one more time. Then we're going to come in. Behind Cobb, his two men shifted in their saddles. They were younger, Hollis ranch hands. They didn't have badges, but they had rifles laid across their laps. Jude stepped out from the shadow. Sheriff, he said. Cobb turned. His hand moved toward his holster. He didn't draw. Jude's rifle was already up, lever down, steady on Cobb's chest. Cobb, tell your men to drop their rifles. Then tell them to ride. Cobb looked at the rifle. He looked at Jude's eyes. You're making a mistake, son. Possibly. Tell your men. There was a long pause. Then Cobb spoke without turning. Boys, drop them and ride. The two younger men hesitated. Now, Cobb said. The rifles hit the dirt. The two men wheeled their horses and rode back down the lane. Cobb stayed. I'll be back, he said. I expect so. With 20 men. Then you should go get them. Cobb mounted up slow. You don't know what you're standing in front of. I think I do. Cobb rode out. Now here's the thing. If you're still with me on this story, take 1 second and hit that subscribe button. There's more coming and it gets bigger. Now back to it. Jude stood on the porch a long moment after the dust settled. Then he walked out into the yard and picked up the two rifles the men had dropped. He came back. He set them inside the door. Maeve was already at the trapdoor by the well, lifting it. Clara came up out of the dark. They're coming back, Jude said. With more. Probably by noon. Clara looked at him. Cheyenne, she said. We have to go now. There's a problem. What? Cobb wasn't surprised to find me. He didn't ask my name. He didn't ask what I was doing here. He knew. Maeve was already understanding. He knew I'd come for you, Jude said. Which means someone told him. Which means someone knew you were here. Which means... He stopped. What? Clara said. The letter you sent. To Marshal Holloway. The one the stagecoach driver gave to Hollis. Hollis didn't just intercept that letter. He showed it to Holloway. Because if Holloway had read your letter and acted on it, Hollis would be in jail. He's not in jail. Which means Holloway read it and gave it back to Hollis. Which means Holloway is in Hollis's pocket. Clara's face went still. Then we can't go to Cheyenne, she said. We have nowhere to go. Jude was looking at the floor. Then up. There's one place. There's a circuit judge. Federal. Out of Denver. He travels the southern part of the territory every 6 weeks. He's there now. Judge Talbot Reyes. He doesn't answer to anyone in Wyoming. He doesn't know Hollis. He doesn't know Holloway. We get the papers to him and Hollis hangs. Where is he? 3 days ride south. Through the Red Desert. Clara closed her eyes. I can't ride 3 days. You can, Jude said. You will. Maeve stood up. I'm coming, she said. Jude looked at her. Maeve. I'm coming. I know the desert. I know the water holes. You'll be dead in 2 days without someone who does. He didn't argue. They were on the road by sunrise. They rode hard the first day. Clara on Maeve's mule. Maeve on a sturdy pony she'd kept in the barn for 10 years. Jude on Hattie. They followed the dry creek bed south and made 15 miles before noon. By the second day they were in the Red Desert. The country opened. No trees. No water for miles. Only red rock and scrub and the wind. Maeve led them to a spring she remembered from when she had crossed the country with her husband in 1859. It was still there. The water was sour, but it was water. They drank. They filled the canteens. They moved on. On the third morning Jude saw the dust behind them. 6 riders. Coming up fast. They've tracked us, he said. Maeve looked back. 6. 6. Cobb won't be with them. He's too heavy for that pace. These are Hollis's sons and ranch hands. How far? 2 hours. Maybe less. Jude looked ahead. The country broke up about a mile on, into a series of narrow canyons. Rock walls. Choke points. We make them come through the canyon, he said. They rode hard. They reached the canyon mouth with maybe 20 minutes to spare. Jude pulled Hattie up and slid off. He pulled the rifle. He pulled a second rifle, one of the ones Cobb's men had dropped. He handed it to Maeve. You ever shoot one of these? I was a nurse, Maeve said. I was also a wife on the frontier. Yes. Take the high rock, the one on the left. I'll take the right. What about me? Clara said. Jude looked at her. You take the mule and you ride. Through the canyon and out the south end. You don't stop. You ride until you find Judge Reyes. The papers are in your coat. He's holding court in Rawlins this week. Ask anyone. I can't. You can. I can't leave you here. You're not leaving us. You're carrying everything we came for. Ride. She looked at him a long moment. She didn't cry. Her face was set. What do I tell him? She said. You tell him your name is Clara Mercer. You tell him Garrett Hollis branded you to keep you from talking. You hand him the pages and you don't say another word until he asks you a question. He'll do the rest. She nodded. Maeve reached up and squeezed her hand. Go on, girl. Clara kicked the mule and rode through the canyon. She did not look back. Jude climbed up to the right-hand rock. Maeve went left. The rifles came up. The 6 riders came in fast. Jude waited until they were halfway through the canyon. Then he fired. The first rider went down. His horse kept running. The other 5 scattered, trying to find cover. There wasn't any. Maeve fired from the left. Another went down. A man Jude recognized as Bart Hollis, the oldest son. Bart hit the rocks and didn't move. The remaining 4 dropped from their horses and fired upward. The bullets cracked against the rock around Jude. He didn't move. He waited. He fired again. The third man fell. The remaining 3 started to fall back. Jude stood up. Hollis, he called. The youngest son, couldn't have been more than 19, looked up. Your father sent you out here to kill a branded woman. Your father is going to hang for what he did. You can ride away now, or you can stay and die for him. Your choice. The boy looked at the body of his brother. He looked back at Jude. I can't ride home if I run, he called back. You can. Your mother's there. She doesn't know what your father is. Go home and tell her. Be the one who tells her. The boy thought about it a long moment. Then he stood up. He dropped the rifle. He walked back to his horse. He mounted up. He rode away south. The 2 remaining men looked at each other. One of them, a ranch hand older, also stood and dropped his weapon. The other tried to crawl behind a rock and bring his rifle up. Maeve fired. He didn't try again. It was over in under 10 minutes. Jude climbed down. He walked over to where Bart Hollis lay. The man was dead. Jude went through his coat. He found a sealed letter. He opened it. The letter was from Garrett Hollis to Sheriff Cobb. Dated yesterday morning. It instructed Cobb to ensure that Mercer and her companion did not reach any court of any kind, by whatever means necessary, and that any inquiry into the matter be closed permanently. It was signed in Hollis's own hand. Jude folded the letter and put it in his coat. It was the second piece of paper that would hang Garrett Hollis. Maeve came down from her rock. 3 dead, she said. I know. That doesn't get easier. No. She put her hand on his arm. We did what had to be done. They mounted up. They rode south. They reached Rawlins late that evening. They found Judge Talbot Reyes in the back room of a saloon, eating a steak and reading the territorial papers. They found Clara already there. She was sitting across from him, the 43 pages spread out in front of him, and the judge was reading the 7th page with his fork halfway to his mouth, frozen, his eyes very still. He looked up when Jude and Maeve walked in. Are you Mr. Calder? He said. Yes, sir. This young woman tells me you found her. Yes, sir. The judge looked back down at the papers. He didn't lift his fork. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, Mr. Calder, I have been a federal judge for 19 years. I have rarely held in my hands evidence this complete and this damning. Mr. Hollis will be in chains by the end of the week. Sheriff Cobb will be removed within 48 hours. Marshal Holloway will be investigated and prosecuted. The settlers who were defrauded will have their land restored. And you, Miss Mercer, will have your name and your reputation publicly cleared by every court and every newspaper this office can reach. Clara couldn't speak. She just nodded. The judge picked up his fork again, considered the steak, set the fork back down. I find, he said quietly, that I have lost my appetite. Garrett Hollis was arrested at his own dinner table 4 days later. 2 federal marshals from Denver walked into the dining room of the Hollis Ranch and laid out the warrant in front of him in front of his wife and his youngest son. Hollis didn't say a word. He stood up. He put his napkin on the table. He let them take him. His wife followed them out to the wagon. She did not cry. She did not speak to her husband. She watched the wagon go. That night she walked into the parlor and took down every photograph of him from the wall and put them in a wooden crate and carried the crate out behind the barn and set it on fire. The youngest son helped her. He didn't say anything either. They watched the photographs burn down to the frames. Sheriff Mason Cobb was removed from his post within 48 hours. He was indicted for conspiracy and for accepting bribes. He didn't run. He waited at his own kitchen table for the marshals to come. When they came, he stood up, took off his badge, set it on the table and said only, I knew this day would find me. Marshal Holloway tried to run. He made it as far as the Nebraska line before federal officers caught him. He was tried in Denver. He got 15 years. Garrett Hollis was tried in Rawlins. The trial took 6 days. Clara Mercer testified on the 3rd day. She wore a clean blue dress that Maeve had pressed for her. The brand on her forearm was wrapped in linen and she did not unwrap it. She didn't need to. She spoke for 40 minutes without breaking. She named every parcel of stolen land. She named every settler family who had been driven off. She named the night the knife had been placed on her pillow. She named the day they had taken her. When she was done, the courtroom was so quiet you could hear the wood stove pop. Garrett Hollis was sentenced to hang. The sentence was carried out the following month. The land was returned. The 18 families who could be found were notified. Some came back. Some had moved on too far to come back. The federal court paid restitution to the ones who couldn't return. The Pelham boy, the only one of his family who had survived the fire, was 11 years old and living in a boarding home in Cheyenne. Clara wrote to him. She sent him $3 and a letter saying she was sorry it had taken so long for the truth to come out. She signed the letter Yours, Clara Mercer. The boy wrote back. The letter took 2 months to arrive. He thanked her for the money. He said he was learning to read. He said he wanted to write to her again when he could. Clara wrote to him every month for the next 23 years. Jude Calder stayed at Maeve's homestead through the winter. He helped her fix the roof, which had been leaking since 1881. He helped her cull the herd. He didn't talk much. He read in the evenings. Books Maeve hadn't opened in a decade. In the spring, Clara opened a school. It was a small school. 1 room. A stove in the corner. 12 children at first. By the 2nd year, 22. She taught reading. She taught arithmetic. She taught history out of a book she had ordered from Philadelphia. She wore long sleeves all year, even in summer. One day a little girl asked her why. Clara thought about it. She rolled up her left sleeve. She showed the girl the brand. Thief, faded now but still readable. She said, "A man did this to me a long time ago. He did it because I knew something he had done that was wrong, and he wanted me to be silent. I was not silent. He went to prison. I came here, and now I teach you. So when somebody tells you to be silent about a wrong thing, You remember this mark, and you remember that they tried it on me and it didn't work." The little girl looked at the mark a long time. Then she said, "Can I touch it?" Clara said yes. The little girl put one finger on the brand. She nodded once, as if she had decided something private. Then she went back to her seat. Clara rolled her sleeve down. Jude came to the school once a week to bring her firewood. He didn't come inside. He left the wood by the door and rode away. Sometimes she would see him from the window and she would lift a hand. He would lift his. In the fall of that second year he came in. He stood by the door with his hat in his hand. "I'm thinking of going west," he said. "Oregon. Maybe Washington Territory." Clara was at her desk. She set down her pen. "When?" she said. "Spring." "All right." He turned the hat in his hands. "I came to ask you something." "All right." "I came to ask if you would come with me." Clara looked at him a long moment. Then she said, "Yes." He nodded. He put the hat on. He went outside. She sat at her desk for a long time. Then she walked over to the wood stove. She opened the door. She fed in another piece of the wood he had brought her. She closed the door. She went back to the window. He was already 100 yards down the road, riding slow, Hattie taking her time. The boot that had caught her in the ribs, a year and a half before, on a stretch of road 30 miles north of here, it had belonged to a man who was now in the ground. The men who had stood and watched were in cells or fugitive or hanged. The road where they had left her had been ridden over 1,000 times by farmers and freight wagons and children walking to school, and the dust had long since covered the place where her body had lain. But the cowboy who had climbed off his horse that day was still here, and in the spring she would ride west with him.